Welcome to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Julie and Mindy to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. Today we're talking about self-pity, failure, and regret. 3 big emotions we all want to avoid. Join us as we share when we fall into these emotional traps and how we're learning to say no to their destructive influence in our lives. Let's get started. Listeners, today we're discussing Chapter 6 in our monthly book series, Happy School by Julie Gordon. And if you're new to this series, you don't need to be reading the book to follow along. We're doing 1 episode a month, and today we're up to Chapter 6, which talks about how to steer clear of self-pity, failure, and regret. And Julie and Mindy, I don't think there's anyone out there who has not experienced those 3. Are they emotions, thoughts? What are they? Self-pity, failure, and regret.
Yeah, ugly things.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, they're all bad, and it makes you just a very unhappy person when those are the way you describe your life.
Right. And so, listeners, this book is taking us on a journey. The subtitle of the book is Where Women Learn the Secrets to Overcoming Discouragement and Worry. And so one of those secrets to overcoming discouragement and worry is to learn how to not fall into self-pity, failure, and regret. And I think that's just so easy. I think we can just fall into it without even realizing that we're there.
Mm-hmm.
So today we've got a lot to talk about, and I think there's a lot to say on this topic. But before we get started, I wanted to just quote a couple of things from the book to let you know what the author, Julie Gordon, thinks about this. Unhappy people always have negative emotions, and you know that emotions are produced from thoughts. In these next 3 lessons, I want to highlight some quicksand areas that many humans in every generation fall prey to. And what are those quicksand areas? The self-pity, the past failure, and the subsequent regret. And, I don't think that we even normally look at those 3 words and think, I can even help having those. I mean, is that something that you guys think oh yeah, I really need to take control of that? Or do you just think, well, that's just normal. Everybody has that.
I think they're acceptable, like anybody you talk to, it's completely acceptable. And you're kind of expected to, share those feelings, emotions every once in a while. I know I definitely can find somebody's story on Facebook every time I get on.
I like her analogy of quicksand too, because that's such a, like how it pulls you down. And that's so true. Once you're kind of going into that room, you just sink lower and lower and lower.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, to get started, maybe we should define what self-pity is. Because is it really just like feeling sorry for yourself? Is it a level of feeling sorry for yourself? What does it really mean? And for her, she said that self-pity is feeling sorry for yourself because you don't have more of something. Self-pity can be from not having certain physical attributes or from not having certain talents or gifts. Or you can have self-pity because you don't think that you've had the same opportunities or advantages that others have had, or from feeling violated or harmed by others. And when I read that paragraph, I thought, you know what? I don't know. I mean, how can someone not have self-pity in those situations? Seems kind of justified to me.
Yeah, I think it is very natural, and we all do it. I think it's maybe her focus is on what you do with it.
Mm-hmm.
How long you let yourself stay there, and if you do, the consequences. She said it's one of our greatest weaknesses of the human spirit. She calls it a beast.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's absolutely zero benefits to it. So it is natural. I think she's just going to help us to see how devastating it can be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you guys find any other different definitions of self-pity or anything that kind of made sense to you to kind of know, oh, this is what I'm truly experiencing?
Well, she did give a self-pity test where she said, if you find yourself whining and grumbling to yourself about how hard you have it and how you don't like it, that's a pretty good indication that you're in self-pity.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As I thought about it, I would kind of contemplated how would I pinpoint what self-pity is in my life? And I kind of summed it up as a constant feeling of woe is me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, pretty much kind of everything that bad happens to you and you kind of always feel wronged and it's never your fault.
Yeah. I think she mentioned blame. Blame was a big red flag that there's self-pity going on.
It's always somebody else. Woe is me.
Well, I looked up just what one dictionary definition was, and the first word was excessive self-absorbed unhappiness over one's own troubles. And I guess that kind of comforted me because I just think it's unrealistic that you're never going to feel sorry for yourself, or that you're not going to recognize that you're in a bad situation, or that a situation just stinks and the other person next to you isn't having to deal with it. But their first word, excessive, I guess, is where we move into a problem. Like maybe there's an appropriate amount of self-pity or feeling sorry for yourself. And then maybe there's just excessive amounts that's to the total exclusion of everything else. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think even if you have maybe a legitimate reason to feel sorry for yourself, maybe it's something really big, that I find sometimes that can trickle down into just little things, like you lost your keys, you lost your phone, it's like everything happens to me, everything's bad, why does this always happen? Like it can just kind of start to take over all of your life,
Right. I'm saying sometimes people are going to wrong you. That will happen. People will be mean or nasty, and you will be wronged sometimes, and sometimes it's not your fault. But I think that at that point you have to decide what to do with those feelings, and instead of letting the quicksand and the deep dive of awfulness in your life continue to permeate, you either have to just forgive the person, move on. There's a way to try to deal with that. But sometimes you're in a really bad situation or with bad people.
Yeah. I think in the book, Darby blames her mom and her family of origin for not equipping her to think properly. And, she has a lot of issues with her mother, so she blames her. And the author says, this may be harsh, but mature adults don't blame other people. That now that you are an adult, as a child, you may legitimately feel that way, but now that you're an adult, you can learn to think differently. And that is harsh news, but it's probably true.
It is harsh because you read what her mother does and what she says to Darby, and you're totally, she's awful. So you again, you totally, it's acceptable. You're like, oh, of course Darby's messed up. Look at her mom.
Right. Well, if you have self-pity, is there a chance that it's because you feel special or that you're owed a certain kind of life? This is kind of an ouch question.
Well, of course we're special, Marie. What are you trying to say?
Yeah, I think even if we don't want to admit it, that is really the underlying belief in self-pity, that we don't deserve our circumstances or that we deserve better. And I don't think I'd ever say that out loud, but that's how we live. As Christians, I think it's even easy to adopt kind of a, we talk about how bad the whole prosperity gospel is, which is about your finances. But I think sometimes you can transfer that to your circumstances about your health or your relationships. Like, if I follow all the rules and pray the right prayer and have enough faith and almost like God's on my side, then no harm will ever come to me. And if we live long enough, and some people don't even have to live that long, we learn that harm does come to us and to everyone. And I just think that's something that all of us will eventually wrestle with, making sense of, oh, I thought I was doing everything I was supposed to do, and I'm not getting the results I want.
Yes. We expect that we're supposed to be happy in life all the time. Right. And no matter what I say and the wisdom that the Lord will show me here and there, that I finally think, oh, okay, well, that's, I have to surrender. I'm still genuinely surprised when a situation arises and I'm not happy.
Yeah. Why is it we always expect the easy road, never the hard one?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I'm thinking about the phrase that you are owed a certain kind of life. And I think that we do fall into that, not like a, you owe me this, but I think if our life has been a consistent way, like I think of people that live in third world countries and maybe they, all live in one room and there's like 10 of them and they go outside to go to the bathroom and like they have one meal a day. That's like their level of life that they're used to. So maybe if you were living in that situation, you wouldn't feel self-pity because that's all you know necessarily, maybe. I mean, I am completely speculating here. But if you live in a developed world and we suddenly had to all live in one room and go outside to the bathroom, and like, I think we would feel very much like this is not the kind of situational life that we're owed. I don't know. Does that make sense? I think when we feel like we're owed a certain kind of life, it's because things have taken a turn from what we've ever known. And maybe other people are living like that, but we've just never had to.
Yeah, I think we get in the trap of we're owed what everybody else is getting, like you said. And then if you like I went to Kenya and saw people living in one room and having one meal every couple of days. And when they would lose a child to malaria, they were sad, but it was almost just like that was expected, well, this is the third child we've lost. Like, we know this, we know this happens. And we just don't have, we don't have those expectations. We're going to live forever in America.
Yeah. Right? We have an expectation that if our child gets sick, there will be ready medical care, competent.
Right. We'll fix it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's also, we talk about what you look at, what you're around, what you're comparing yourself to really also plays into our mindset of what we expect. If you live in a neighborhood, for instance, everybody has a pool, but you, well, you're so thrilled that you could finally afford a house in this neighborhood. But now all of a sudden, a year after living there, you're not so grateful. You're just thinking, I don't have a pool. You know what I mean? Like your perspective completely changes because of what you're focusing on, looking at, interacting with. I remember hearing a missionary story at church one time. And after the missionary, gave their testimony and the journey that they had been on, the pastor made this comment, and it's stuck with me to this day. He said, so often we in America are trudging through shallow water. Like the shallow water is so shallow, yet you act like it's neck deep. You act like these problems that we're facing are neck deep, and it's just shallow water. And so I think about that a lot. And I think that we do, it's kind of an offhanded comment that people make. Oh, it's just first world problems, right? We say that a lot. And I hear that a lot. Oh, it's another first world problem. Yet it really, makes people's days kind of bad when they deal with these first world problems.
Yeah. Like me not having a dishwasher for 2 weeks.
That's,
yep. Yeah. Like, really? I'm going to complain about having to hand wash dishes. I still have running water and clean water and nice dishes and food to put on them.
Right.
But if I focus on the broken dishwasher, I'm going to be unhappy.
Right.
Right.
In the book, she says that hard things do happen. People are left in relationships. They are fired. They're maimed. They're forgotten. Accidents happen. People fail in careers. They endure theft or they have health issues. Horrendous events like war, pandemics, and murder occur. And those are all terrible. But this is what I want to point out. She says, what is striking, though, is that individuals with the exact same circumstances or situations often give their circumstances completely different interpretations. For example, one person victimized by fate and carries a sense of being injured, thus feeling sorry for themselves, while another person, remember, one with the exact same circumstance, does not feel sorry for themselves. And I think this is why I am always attracted to, not pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but like someone endured a horrible thing and they came out on top. Like I read every one of those stories. I love those movies. I am always attracted to that because in my mind, I'm always trying to reconcile. If I had that same exact set of circumstances, would I be okay with it like this person seemingly is?
Well, Marie, that's why there's a book or movie made about those things, because they're the exception.
Right.
Most of us are like dying with our negative
True.
circumstances. You know what I mean? So it's so inspiring. You're like, everybody told you had no talent. You know, I'm thinking that Kurt Warner movie.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh, no talent. You're not going to make it, you know? And yet he continues. You're like, well, he's stupid.
Right.
Or he, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. But then he prevails.
But he actually does prevail. And you're like, oh, because it's not normal.
Right. It's normal for us to fall into self-pity and give up.
Right.
Well, and the bad circumstances and the difficulties are also normal, that everyone experiences them. The not normal is how they react. And I love at the end of the study guide, she said, talk about beauty, talk about influence, like when you can rise above all that and still like not give in to despair and still have hope. And she quotes from Proverbs, you know, a woman who's able to laugh at her future. And that is just so much more attractive than self-pity.
Right.
I was just thinking that, Julie, like how beautiful are the people that have suffered and that are able to speak of their circumstances with a contentment that just passes all understanding, that have a joy that passes all understanding. And you're sitting there mystified at how does that happen?
Yeah.
Well, here's a question, Julie, that you came up with for all of us. And on the surface, it seems like a no-brainer, but I think there's a lot more to delve into here. You said, do you believe God has the right to have mysterious purposes? Think about Job.
Okay.
Well, I mean, he has the
Julie.
right, but I'm not happy about it.
Doesn't like it or understand it.
Well, I put this question in there because I have really been studying and praying about this topic for a while, as you can imagine. And I think when you suffer, it can make belief in a good God hard. And I'm not saying like that I've lost my belief in God, but for a while, I wasn't sure if I could trust that he was good. And I think that we all will ask these questions eventually. Like, I mean, we all look at like the war in Ukraine and think, gosh, how can God be good and powerful and let all that happen? You know, babies and pregnant women dying and stuff like that. But we just don't have an answer. But when it really happens to you, then you really wrestle and you go right to God, you know? And, you know, how can God be good and powerful and yet created a world where evil, you know, runs rampant and we suffer so much and we're in so much pain. And, you know, Job did this, and his story is basically like how to respond to the mystery of suffering. And Job doesn't believe that, you know, that he did anything wrong. He declares his innocence, yet he's still suffering. And his quote friends try to give him explanations like, well, it's because of this. It's because of that. You must have done this. You must have said this. And they give all these explanations, but I mean, none of them were given by God. So Job is kind of sitting in this tension of I'm innocent and yet I'm suffering. So I want to talk to God, and God shows up. Like God enters in and engages with Job. And I think, you know, like every time I've read Job, I've been so disappointed because you don't get any answers from God. You don't get any like, well, here is why. Here's the list. Here's the explanations. Now it's all clear. You know, we like those kind of answers. Instead, what he does, and I think this is the first time I've seen this, that I've understood it. He says, Job, look at all I've made. And he shows him like all the creation, like sea animals and how the tides work and how the sun and the moon work and the constellations. And he shows him snow and rain and lightning and the grass and the dew and all these beautiful things. And all those things are like tangible evidence of his goodness. And then he says to Job, will you trust me? And so I think the answer to those hard questions isn't going to be like in some list or explanation. It's going to be in a personal encounter with God. Like it's going to be different for each person. And just looking for God's goodness in his creation and around us and through gratitude, like trusting, not giving in to the despair, but we have a choice on how we react. We have a choice to hope. And, you know, I think that's all just a picture of Christ entering into our suffering of, this after Job, but how Christ was a picture of Christ entering into our suffering and sitting with us and through it and eventually healing it. And so I think it's more about a personal encounter. It's not something that anybody can give you the answer to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Our pastor has been going through the book of Ruth, and we were talking about, is God good even in circumstances that don't seem good? And he gave this example that has stuck with me on how it is hard for us to see God's good. Like, he had a colleague whose baby was born with a lip and tongue tie. So what they have to do for that is you have to go in and have that cut. And then every few hours, the parent has to reopen that wound so it doesn't seal back together. And he said, think of yourself as the baby. You don't know why this is happening to you. It's really super painful. It does not appear good. And think about the parent as God. That parent loves that child. They're doing what's best for that child. They're pained by the child's pain. They don't want to go in there and do that. And every time the parent has to do that, it hurts them, but they know it's eventually for the child's better good. And that picture has just stuck with me. If I'm the baby, I'm going to scream and think that parent is horrible. Yet I'm also going to look for them for comfort after the pain is stopped, or to make the pain stop. I don't know, those two pictures have just stuck in my mind. We just can't see in the midst of something that there's any good for us, and it only hurts. And why is this happening?
Yeah, and the parent can't say this to the baby, but he's thinking, you just got to trust me.
Right. Yeah, because the baby can't even understand. If it was an older child, you could explain why, but this is how God, he doesn't explain why we're going through it.
And even an older child probably wouldn't want the pain,
No.
Even with an explanation.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think it comes back also when we expect that we're supposed to be happy. I heard somebody say this the other day, everybody deserves to be happy. And the longer I've lived, the more I don't believe that. I don't believe that our purpose on earth is to be happy, because there's a lot of suffering. And again, I think if you go to a third world country, the things that you find joy in are certainly not circumstantial. But if you read the Bible at all, especially the New Testament, and the Old Testament's pointing to Jesus, the New Testament is telling us, about Jesus' life. And we've got this silly saying, what would Jesus do? But in all reality, you think, well, what would Jesus do? How did he live? How did he combat living on this earth? And I'd like to read Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight, every sin which clings so closely. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. And I love this picture of Jesus who, for the joy set before him, it wasn't something that he achieved on the earth. He endured the cross. He endured all that it was, but that we can know that he is seated. He's finished. And he's no longer fighting the battle of sin and shame and evil because he already overcame it. And so we can trust him. He's sitting down and he's completely in charge.
Right.
So yes, I guess God does have the right to have a mysterious purpose. I sure do wish we knew why it was. But Julie, it would probably be like you said, even if you could explain it, like you could explain the why I have to reopen this wound over and over again for your tongue tied to an older child. It doesn't mean you'd lay down and willingly take the pain. You'd protest, you'd kick and scream against it. You don't want it, We don't even care if it's for our good. We don't want the pain.
Right.
Yeah. And, probably, and it's still about the encounter with God. And, the child would probably trust his parents more than anyone else to do it, because of their relationship.
Right. All right. Well, what do you do to refute and replace? Because we've talked about that a lot in this book. We're supposed to be refuting and replacing interpretations of our circumstances. We're supposed to have a negative thought and replace it with something else. What do you do when you're in a circumstance where you're like, I'm feeling sorry for myself and so-and-so isn't having to deal with that and it's not fair and everything bad happens to me and,
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think acceptance is key. And, some things you don't have a choice over. I mean, actually, you do have a choice because you can choose how you respond, but you can make the best of it or you can ruminate over it and be miserable. And that part doesn't come easily. And honestly, I still struggle with that at times, but I just have to work really hard to protect my mind and mostly from myself, not outside thoughts, but inside. And this book has just really been helpful to teach me how to lock up those thoughts when they come because I want to dwell on them. And it goes back to thinking I deserve better or I have the right to what I want. But quarantining that sadness and focusing on gratitude and goals. And like we talked about last week, our genius zone, like those are all ways to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that has just been backed up by a lot of prayer, asking God to give me his perspective on my disappointments and sadness.
Mm-hmm.
I won't call it a pity party, but I'm going to call it a grief party. But when major things have happened that are disappointing in my life, I think that my moment of beginning to accept has to start with grieving the idea that I had and letting that go. And I almost have to give that its own space and time where I do tell God how disappointed I am, how sad I am, how it's not supposed to be this way and why. And I give him all of those emotions and I rant and rave about it and I have to grieve. I have to grieve whether it be just a fantasy or just an idea, what I thought was supposed to happen. And then after that grieving has taken place, because it does take time and you have to speak those things, let them go. And then it's like, okay, now please fill me with what your idea is, or just fill me with you. Because
That's so true.
I don't know what the next step is after this, because my life is now completely different than what I wanted it to be or what I thought it was going to be like.
Yeah, because that one thing, like you said, Mindy, involves a death of a lot of other things, a lot of other dreams, hopes, the way you thought things would be. And so you have to let each of those things go. And that's the hard part.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, do you guys tend to play any failure movies or what could have been movies in your mind? I hate failure movies and what could have been movies.
This is a horrible question.
I could win an Oscar for Best Director, Best Actress in my what could have been movies.
Ooh, Julie.
I know.
It's like if I had just gotten my way, this is the way it could have been. And then it starts, like if I get my way, then this beautiful story unfolds, like with no problems, no pitfalls, no sadness. Just, I could probably even win Best Cinematography because it's so beautiful,
Right.
And a friend shared this quote with me and it's so great. And I really am trying to live by it. She said, disappointments are just misunderstood mercies. Now, I'm not going to say all disappointments are mercies. Like, I don't really see how death and cancer is a mercy. maybe in a way that I don't understand. Yes. But I'm trying to live by that more just everyday things. Like if I miss a flight, or if I have to cancel plans, or if the weather's bad, whatever, or there was a detour on the highway. Like I just try to look at those more like mercies that I can't understand.
Right.
Not so much in my big issue that I am dealing with now, but just trying to live by that in smaller things.
Well, and you're saying that you think about, if I'd only gotten my way. I think my regret movies are, if only I had done this or that differently. And we beat ourselves up about it. Like, if only I could go back and do it knowing what I know now. Or why did I make that choice? Or that was so stupid of me. Or, like that's, I think, where we have like crippling regret sometimes.
I feel like those feelings, Marie, remind me of like a ball and chain strapped around your ankle. Like those silly old like prisoners with the white and black jumpsuit, and they've got that ball and chain. I think about that. Like you're maybe trudging forward, but you're not moving. Like you're in a prison all by yourself because you cannot move forward. You can't walk. You can't run, and you cannot thrive if you're constantly living with regret and looking at the past and wishing for something different.
Right.
She's talked about in the past, watching the parade of thoughts that marches across your brain. And we've been trained to think that those are very negative things. But for me, I think this week I realized that what could have been movie seems very happy and beautiful. But if it's something that can't be, that is a very negative thought. Like that can really lead to a lot of despair and negativity to let those things, like I have to stop those because it's like, no, that's not the path I'm on. So why go there?
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of interesting, a little bit different than the way she's presented it.
Right. Because we do all have failures. We do all have those places where we can sit back and say, oh, if only I'd done this or that differently. And she says, see your failures in a new light. If you read or listen to biographies of great men or women, they invariably point to their failures as the springboard to their success. And it's a waste of time for you to replay the movie wondering if only I had done this or that. She says, of course you have past failure, but learn from it. Gather your strength and strike out again. Refuse to let the failure define you. Someone is rising from abysmal failure every minute. Oh, sometimes isn't that just that really brings to mind the quicksand to me. Like we have to rise from the quicksand of regret. Oh. But we do, or else we'll just be mired there with that ball and chain, Mindy.
I know, right? But I also feel like this comes back to the trust issue with God. Like, do you really feel like you're more powerful than God and that you have completely messed up or that he can't use you in some way? Like you're too big of a failure for him. I mean, because if you've read the Bible, then you've seen some really messed up people that he's done really miraculous and wonderful things in and through. And so I really think that this again is you're elevating yourself to the point of being over God if you feel that you are somehow more powerful than he is in your failures.
That you can thwart, that your failures could thwart his plans.
Right.
Yeah. And I like how she says, of course you're smarter now. Like, okay, we all admit it. You're smarter now that you've seen the outcome. So at the time you made the decision, you made the best decision with what you knew then. Right. And it's just important to remember.
Right.
You didn't have the full knowledge at that point in time.
I've certainly joked with friends. I'm like, if I met the me that I was in my early 20s, I wouldn't have liked me very much. I don't know that we would be good friends because I feel like I've changed so much. And I'm like, gosh, I don't think I would have liked me at all.
Well, the author says, having had conversations with thousands of women across the last few decades, she said a few areas stick out in her mind in which American women have the most self-pity. So 1, American women are disappointed in their husband. Number 2, they have issues with their children. Number 3, they have a dysfunctional family of origin. Number 4, they have inadequate finances. And number 5, they have a lack of discretionary time. And then number 6, they have health issues. Well, that pretty much covers just about every area in life that you can have a disappointment in. I think any of them could fall in those 6 things. What do you guys think?
Yeah, all I could think about was when we talked about third world countries, like the people I know in Kenya, well, they might have an arranged marriage, so very little romance. Troubled kids. They probably didn't have parents reading self-help books and Dr. Dobson.
Right.
They have no income, no free time, and they are dying of diseases.
Yeah.
This is definitely, well, I don't know if it's a European problem, but it does seem to be particularly an American problem.
Right.
To have all these unbelievable expectations.
But is it comforting for you to say to yourself, people in other countries have an arranged marriage, so I shouldn't be unhappy with the fact that my husband and I are, fighting so much that we're nearing divorce or something?
No, I mean, I remember when I got back, I felt a lot of guilt over things that I enjoyed here that I know that they're not enjoying. Basics, and I tried to change the way I lived my life and the way we did things, and it just didn't last. Like, you just can't live that way here. And that for that long. It lasted for a little while, but yeah, it there's a disconnect there just because we're surrounded by so much.
Well, yeah, and if you're surrounded by friends that have a happy marriage, it's not going to comfort you that in another country, someone you don't even know doesn't have a happy marriage. Like, we want to feel like maybe our circumstances are equal to or better than the people around us. That's probably our human barometer.
Are the people around us mostly movies and books, though? Like Hollywood marriages? I mean, I think if you talk to anybody and they were honest, they would say their marriage isn't perfect.
Right.
I'm not saying that there's not great marriages. I mean, I feel like I have a great marriage, but I'm saying it's not problem free. If we were more open and honest, we all would have things that we admit that we struggle with and that are hard. I think maybe in America we compare ourselves to some kind of idealistic,
but
something.
I don't think that ideal circumstances absolutely correlate to happiness. Certainly not joy, because people, and I'll use the third world country example again, the amount of joy in a third world country could be greater than the amount of joy that Americans
I think it is. I think it is.
Because they are looking for things that are lasting. Most of our experience or circumstances around us are, material things or temporal, superficial things. Yeah. They pass away. Yeah. And so you kind of really get down to the nitty gritty of what really matters in life when those things are stripped away, because I feel that the most joyful people I have met are the ones that have suffered the most, the ones that have surrendered themselves to the Lord's hand and have found joy after.
And that is a weird thing of like what I'm experiencing. It's that whole thing of like, no, it's not enviable, but it does bring you into a different level of a relationship with God and trust and finding joy in things that you didn't see before. And so it's true. You don't want it, but it does happen. Because you hear people say, I wouldn't trade it for anything, and you think, how could that be? But
right.
And I can kind of see some of that now,
Well, Julie, I feel like of all the things on this list, all of them pale in comparison. Like, we just don't even care that much about any of them if we develop a health issue. Like, that's like the biggest one, especially a serious health issue like John, your husband, has. Like, your dysfunctional family, I just want my health back. I'll take the dysfunctional family. Some issues with my kids, fine. Just take the health issue, because the health issue seems to be, well, it is the most permanent and life-altering.
It seems the least fixable too.
Right.
Yeah. That's where it finally hit Job too. When Julie, you mentioned you'd been reading Job, but that was kind of the last straw for him, was when it touched his health.
Well, yeah, because if you don't have your health, you can't enjoy your expendable income, your family relationships, your abundant free time, your your marriage, your kid. Like it just makes all of those other things less enjoyable. I mean, well, I guess it does. I don't know. I can't say that because I'm not the one sick, but
well, yeah, but you're close to someone who is sick, yeah.
But I mean, I know he finds joy and meaning in all of those things still. But I mean, it's still harder to live your life.
Right. Well, what kind of grateful practices do you have? This was a question that you came up with, Julie, and I feel like you've probably had to come up in the last year with grateful practices that you never even probably practiced before John's diagnosis.
Yeah, I mean, back when Ann Voskamp's book, 1,000 Gifts, came out, I started the list. I still have it. I don't know that I ever made it to 1,000, but it's more just kind of moment by moment with me. I'm not as intentional as I probably should be about writing things down. I mean, I occasionally do, but it's not daily, It's just trying to look for things every day that are good or beautiful or something remarkable in a bad situation. I thought this was really beautiful. I was listening to this podcast on the airplane yesterday, and it was about this man. He wrote Tuesdays with Morrie. I can't remember his name, but that book. And he and his wife had this unique opportunity to adopt a child, like in their 50s, through a mission trip that they had taken. And so they brought her home, and she ended up getting a rare form of cancer as a toddler. And I think she only lived 2 years with them. Oh. And she really suffered. And, but they just talk about how much joy she brought into their life. Like, she was just this precious little girl. He told all these stories about her. And he said, he's written a new book. And he said, I couldn't have written this book 5 years ago because I was so angry. Like, how could God take our little girl from us, And he said, but through the anger and all of that he's worked through, he's eventually, instead of asking, like, why did God take her? He can now ask, why did God give her to us? Like, what did we do to merit her joy in our life? And now he's able to focus more on the joy she brought, instead of him taking her, like he said, who am I to deserve to have a child like in our 50s when most people don't have children? And he said, now I see I didn't lose the child, but I was given something. And just that gratefulness. He said, when you're grateful, you just don't have time to be angry anymore. But you're right. He did have to work through the 5 years of anger. He didn't just he didn't just get there quickly. But I thought that was really pretty. That's just a really simple truth. But I thought that was really beautiful to think about what you do have versus losing.
Right.
So that's a gratitude practice.
To
think about what you do have. Yeah.
Yeah. Mindy, I know you talk a lot about gratitude practices.
I do. Each day, I do try to take time out in the mornings to begin my day by journaling, and I do specifically look for the things that happened that were good the day before, and I try to actually write those down. And some days that's easier than other days. And so that's one of the things I try to do in my journal is each day think about the wonderful things that happened the day before, just trying to find things. And then the nights that we're blessed enough for the four of us to be able to sit down to dinner, which doesn't happen as often as I would like, we do try to recount at the dinner table, not just the Thanksgiving style. Let's go around the table and one thing you're thankful for,
Right.
But it is a little bit like that in a silly way. But, asking, well, what's something good that happened today? Because it's so easy for us to be in the practice of when we get our kids, back in the house, that they tell you all the bad things that happen. I've just kind of noticed that over the years. It was like, you think that their lives are horrible. And then you hear this wonderful thing. You're like, why didn't you tell me that? Well, that's not what we're used to talking about. Just trying to change the dynamic of family time and recounting blessings, like trying to actually force ourselves to say something out loud, I'm thankful that this worked out. Especially if it's something that you've been praying for. And then there's other times where I am in a pity party all on myself. And this book has been helpful because like Darby yells, hot potato, move into another room, and I think that I'm like, yes, because there are still times that a parade will start and, it's a well-worn path from years and years. And I think, okay, I need to change this. And it's hard. It's hard to then try to get back to you have to okay, I have to forgive that person again. And I have to, take on what the Lord has for me now. And no, this isn't what I thought, let it forgive, let it go. And well, yeah, thank you that you worked this out. And it's just, that's a whole mental thing of praying through those times where I am stuck with these negative emotions.
Yeah. How many times do you pray like, well, if God gets me out of this situation, I will not forget it and I will trust him for the next one. Like you always think like, but I always still do need to go back and look at times that God has answered prayer in the past, like what he's done in the past, and thank him for that. And it reminds me that this situation is within his control also. And Julie, I thought of that book that you talked about earlier this year on the podcast, and I'm a fan. I think it was like Midnight Library. And it's like the premise of the book is this person has, despaired to the point of wanting to take her own life. And she basically is offered the chance to go and choose a life and choose other lives that she could have taken. But she finds out that every choice she had problems that she couldn't have foreseen. And in the end, she chooses her own life again. And I think that sometimes in gratitude, we can think about it almost could be worse. Is that like just such a negative way of thinking about it? But
it goes back to that mercies, disappointments can be mercies. Like, look what she, in the book, she got to see what she was spared from that choice.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of a gratitude process. Maybe it's a twisted gratitude practice.
Oh, but you're not wrong about that though, Marie, because I feel that way too. I'm like, oh, it could be worse. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I think you have to be careful with that one because there might be a time when you think it can't be worse.
Right.
True.
You know what I'm saying? Like if it's always comparative,
true,
that might not always work.
No, I mean, you're right, Julie. Yeah. I mean, these are just like ideas, but they all have to come back to what you said, Mindy, like surrendering your idea and your desire that it's not going to happen, and then working through the grief and then trusting God to work it out, because what other choice do you have?
Right. And then hopefully after enough time passes of grieving and letting go, you're able to begin counting the blessings of the new growth and the new life that can spring forth from the ashes that have happened.
Okay, well, this is kind of a heavy question to end on. This was a heavy topic. I mean, self-pity. Initially I wrote down that I think some self-pity is okay. Like, just like we allow time for worry, or, she says like set aside a designated time in the book to worry or think about that thing that's disappointing. I feel like shouldn't there be allowed a designated time for self-pity? Like, I don't know, Julie, like when John was diagnosed, like I just wanted to sit in the this stinks period for a while. Let's just say it is. It's horrible. Yeah. I don't want to look for a blessing in disguise. I don't want to look and see a silver lining. Like the situation sucks all the way around. And that's all I want to hear people say.
Yeah. And it's not helpful, like to hear, well, everything happens for a reason, or this is God's will, or, oh, you must be so strong for God to give you that. None of that is helpful.
No.
It's hurtful. Actually, it's hurtful.
Yeah. You just want people to say it. It's horrible. It is. It's horrible. And then to sit there and walk with you as you grieve it and move through those phases. That's all you can do. At the beginning, you're kind of in a fight or flight mode. Like, what are we going to do? You're scrambling. And so a little bit of the self-pity has set back in the, now that things have calmed down and life seems a little more normal. So I still have to fight that every day. For sure. To end on something a little more uplifting, one of the things she says at the end is, you can feel sorry for yourself about how hard and unfair life is, or you can choose to be one of the rare, magnificent, and noble women who takes charge of her thoughts. These lovely women are the mature in life, believing there's opportunity and obstacles, and remembering with God that all things are possible. This is the new you. Take it, own it. That negative, whining, critical, sad, upset old you can become a woman who laughs at the days to come. So that's the goal.
Yes.
That is beautiful.
Don't hit it every day or most days, but that is the goal. Yeah.
I love that we do delve into these topics. I mean, who would purposely say, hey, let's meet for coffee and talk about self-pity? But
right.
Here we are doing it.
Yes.
But
yes.
I appreciate it though very much that we do this because it's not a fun topic, but we all struggle with it.
Right.
We didn't really talk about the excessive whining and complaining and staying there too long. She said that friends will eventually they'll leave you because nobody can sit there that long.
No.
That's a fear. That's a fear because I know like what I have to go through is a long thing, and it's like, oh, I don't want to wear my friends out. I don't want to burden them because who wants to sit with this? I don't even want to sit with this, So, I don't know. That's something to consider. And she said, that may be where a support group comes in, other people that that understand and are going through the same thing. But hopefully, I've never been
No, I don't think you need to worry about wearing your friends out.
Well, not about this, but there's other things that I've whined and complained about.
For sure. Yeah, you can tell when people check out. They're like, yeah, you're done with the rant because I'm done listening to you.
Yeah.
We've all done that about something or another.
Yes.
Believe me.
Yes.
That's usually when your friend turns to you and says, first world problems.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay.
Checkmate. Time to move on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to I'm a fan. Mindy, what are you a fan of this week?
Well, it seems so shallow now to talk about.
That's the whole point of I'm a fan.
Okay, let's lighten it up a little bit because I am a fan of a shirt from Target.
Okay.
And so I actually went and bought every color. Bryce always makes fun of me when I do this.
I do this too. I can hear my
gosh.
daughters in the background being like, Mom, you don't need 4 of the same shirt.
No. Yes, I do. So I started with one color and then I went back and bought the other colors. So I mentioned how much I love sweaters. You guys tease me about that. It's true. Well, now that we're in spring and it's warm here in Georgia, I needed a lighter layer to put over my workout tank top and leggings. And so this is perfect. It's a long sleeve t-shirt. It's cropped and it's a little bit loose. It has I'm wearing one right now. It has a boat neck, which I love. It's a little wider.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's just the weight of it is perfect. It has thumb holes, but it's by the brand All in Motion. It's in the workout section, but it's basically just called the Women's Supima Cotton Long Sleeve Top.
Ooh.
And it's super soft. I love the weight. I bought it in the cream, the black, and the olive green.
Oh, I love olive green.
Yeah.
And Supima cotton. I don't know what it is, but whenever I see it, I think, oh, that's soft.
It is just perfect. So I want to wear one every day.
Oh, good.
So,
well, I'm definitely going to put a link in our show notes, listeners, so you can run out and get this.
We can all match.
Yes. That's awesome. All right, Julie, what are you a fan of?
Okay, I'm a fan of a movie. I sometimes hate to recommend movies because I never want to offend anyone, and especially this movie because of what's going on. But it's King Richard.
Yes, with Will Smith.
With Will Smith. I hate to even say that. I'm not going to mention anything about how I feel about him or that. So if we just lived on another planet and none of that happened,
okay,
this movie was so good. And I love sports movies.
Oh.
And so it's a movie about Venus and Serena Williams, the tennis stars.
Yeah. And
their dad, who is played by Will Smith, he did an unbelievable job. You hardly notice that it's Will Smith.
Oh.
And just I didn't know any of their backstory. They were from Compton, California, and, living in kind of the projects, low income. The father wasn't very educated. They didn't have a lot of opportunity. There was definitely a prejudice in the tennis world. It was a white person sport, but the father knew that they were champions. And he told them from the time they were little that they would win Wimbledon and be champions and be the best there ever was.
That's amazing.
And he was relentless. The things he did to get them into tennis clubs and into tournaments and to get the right coach and to get the lessons. It was embarrassing the things he would do, but he just never gave up. And It was such a feel-good
I need to watch this movie. I
Yes.
love sports movies. Is it out of the theaters or do you rent it or what do you do?
We rented it on, I
Okay.
think it was on Amazon, but it fits this topic, Marie, because it's like what you said. It's like they overcame every obstacle except for the natural athleticism. They
Right.
had that.
Yeah.
You know, they were
Right.
good tennis players, but they still had to overcome a lot to get to where they were.
Oh, that's
Oh.
amazing. Yes.
I wondered about that. I'm so glad that you went before us and
Yeah.
watched it.
It's
so I
excellent.
Definitely. Okay, that's another good one. I'm a fan this week of something that everyone can put to good use this spring. Julie and Mindy, have you ever bought anything off the half-off rack at Lowe's, like the nursery section, the plants?
Nope.
So
No.
every Lowe's around here has one, and I'm assuming it's nationwide. If you go to the back of their nursery department, they will have, and I don't even want to say half off, it could be 70% off. It's the discounted racks. It's plants that maybe they've gotten a little dry, they weren't watered quite enough. But that's the time to take a chance on a new plant. Like you bring it home. I've had a couple things that I bought over the years off those die, but far and away, almost all of them live and thrive if you get them right in the ground and start watering. And it's a great way to like, oh, I want to try a new plant, but I don't want to invest a lot of money. And I had bought all my phlox. I think I planted them maybe in 2020 off the half-off rack or some kind of discount rack. And as I was looking at them this spring, I thought, look at how beautiful these things have done. And, you know, they were on the half-off rack. So if you're at Lowe's and you're thinking, I'd like to try some new plants outside, see what they have discounted first because you'd be surprised. I mean, they even put like their roses back there, the azaleas. I mean, they put tons of stuff back there as the season goes on. So now's the time to start looking.
That's a good word, Marie.
Yeah.
I feel
Really
like you'd
good.
be all over that, Mindy, because you love to plant things in your yard.
I do love to plant things in my yard. And I remember you talking about the half off rack before, but I had forgotten about it. I need to find where that is in my store.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
probably at the back because that's where like the back of the nursery.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to try Lenten roses, which
Oh.
is, I don't think it's really a rose, but they bloom at Lent.
Oh,
And I've been seeing pictures of them everywhere, and I've never seen one in a store. And somebody told me Lowe's had them. So.
really?
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll get some and then send us a
Yeah.
picture. All right. Well, thanks for talking with me, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
All right.
Sounds great.
Bye.
Bye,
All right,
girls.
bye. We're so happy you joined us today. You can find the show notes for this episode at midlifematterspodcast.com. Also, please tell a friend about the show and help them hit the free subscribe button on their favorite podcast app. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast. That's where we post pictures and stories about all the things we talk about in each episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.